Okay, let's get across some of the other headlines today with Sky News senior reporter Cam Reddin. Cam, great to see you. Talk to me about these kids today that skipped school.
Yeah, and some of them possibly for the second time in a week, Erin. Of course, we saw in major cities last week there was a student strike for climate today, and yesterday as well in Melbourne, this student strike for Palestine. Very similar scenes we've seen in other parts of the world as well. There have been similar student strikes or protests in places across Britain, in Europe, in the United States as well. Many of them wearing their school uniforms. There were many wearing traditional Palestinian headscarves as well. Here's a look at some of the action from today.
Shame, shame, Israel! Shame, shame, Israel! Shame, shame, Israel! Albanese, your hands are red! Albanese, your hands are red! More than 1,000 children dead! More than 1,000 children dead! Albanese, your hands are red! Albanese, your hands are red! More than 1,000 children dead!
So a heavy police protest, a heavy police presence at this protest today, as there was yesterday. It passed relatively without incident, although there was this one occasion, Erin, and it was caught on camera, of a man 49 years of age holding an Israel flag who was approaching some of the protesters. And this incident was caught on camera. I've been told by police in the last few minutes that while he was arrested to prevent a breach of the peace, he's since been released. And at this stage, there have been no charges. But here is the incident of this one man approaching some protesters and a confrontation from police outside Sydney Town Hall.
You're holding my hand. Take your hands off me. I will walk down. I will walk peacefully. Do not touch me.
Why is it always images of someone with an Israeli flag that the police seem to find an issue with? That surprises me.
Well, there was, of course, an incident earlier in this year, Erin, at another protest outside of Sydney Town Hall where a man was arrested as well. I suppose the argument from the police is that they didn't want things to become aggressive in any way. We've seen how some of these protests have ended and quite ugly. Some of those images outside the Opera House went all around the world as well.
No, absolutely.
We know there are increased powers for police to address these as well.
Yeah, I'll have the New South Wales Premier on shortly as well to talk about a little bit of that. Now, as I've said a couple of times now, we're an hour into a 4-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. There was a big explosion. I saw it downstairs just as I was getting ready to come into the studio just before that commenced. But we won't see any hostages released until around 1 a.m, I think our time tomorrow morning, Cam.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you talk about the tension around this, Erin. That explosion you mentioned was in the seconds before this ceasefire formally commenced in Gaza. And I think what that really does is just underline the situation here. This is not a full stop. It's not an end to the conflict. The IDF has said it expects to continue fighting for the best part of several months ahead, but it is a pause for now. And there's an element of give and take here. Will it last the 4 days? Will it last the few hours until these hostages are released? There's so many unknowns here. What we do know is that the promises have been laid out on the table. 50 hostages to be released by Hamas, 150 Palestinian prisoners to be released by Israel as well. The first batch of 13 are expected to be released in the early hours of tomorrow, as you mentioned. And the hope is here, Erin, that after all the bloodshed and death and destruction that we've seen for the past few weeks, is that by tomorrow morning we could be waking up to the images of families being reunited, of mothers and sons and daughters and fathers being reunited again. There is a list we know that the IDF has of these 50 names and faces of the people they're expected to be released, and they'll be checking them off one by one as hopefully they are all reunited again.
Yeah, can't wait for those pictures. Give us a bit of hope, and those families more importantly. 10 homes have been destroyed in Perth after a bushfire emergency tore through the city's north, Cam. It's devastating and I'd say very triggering for a lot of Australians.
Yeah, hopefully not a look into the summer ahead, Erin, but we've seen a couple of incidents in Sydney and also in Victoria where these fires have prompted a very instant response. This one in Wanneroo, about half an hour or so to the northeast of Perth, and it's been treated seriously enough for the West Australian Premier to come home early from his trip. He's been in China for the past few days announcing new flights. He's come straight home, gone from the airport to Wanneroo, where he's expected to speak to locals and to the media as well later tonight. We know the extent of these fires, Erin, how quickly they can get out of control. There's a dangerous mix of high temperatures up into the 40s again over the weekend, dangerous winds as well. This one already growing to around 2,000 hectares in size. Homes lost, some firefighters injured in recent days, although thankfully at this stage minor injuries. We know, and we've been briefed in recent weeks again here in Canberra, that while we're not expecting another repeat of the Black Summer, all of those dangerous signs are there. Hot temperatures, dry soil, plenty of load on the ground. Everyone is being told, essentially, no matter where you live, even half an hour from the city of Perth, to be ready and to have your plans in place.
Yeah. And finally, Cam, 41 days since New Zealand's election and the country's incoming government is finally being sworn in.
It is, yeah. And we think back to 2010 and Julia Gillard when she had to negotiate with the crossbench and the Greens here in Australia. That only took 17 days. So Christopher Luxon and the National Party have been at it for 41. I think the Cricket World Cup only went about 46 days. So he's sort of encroaching on that kind of territory. But it is going to be messy, Erin. You've got three parties involved here. Christopher Luxon, the New Zealand First Party, as well as the ACT Party. And there's this incredible deal where you're going to have two deputy prime ministers throughout the term. Winston Peters, the maverick leader of New Zealand First, will be the deputy PM for the first half of the term. And then on the 31st of March in 2025, he's going to tag out, and a fella called David Seymour, who leads the ACT Party, will take over and do the second half of the term. So how all that's going to work, I don't know. It's a bit of a Frankenstein's monster of a government they've put together.
Bless.
But to borrow the phrase of Christopher Luxon, they're there now. It's been 41 days, and I think everyone just wants to get on with it.
Yes, well, he's promised me he'd come on this show. He said once government is formed, he'll come on. He hasn't responded to my text. He's clearly busy. But next week, Prime Minister, we'll hold you to your word. Thank you so much, Cam. Brilliant.
Good on you, Erin. Thanks.